What's up, everybody? Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. Um, I want to feel your energy. I miss you all so much. I just want to hear from you in a really, really big way. For the folks who don't know who I am, my name is Lekan Olowoye. I'm the founder and CEO of BPTN. Right before I get started, I just really, really, really want to hear from you because I miss seeing folks. Right, so I just want you to shout out your city for me real quickly. Right, in the chat function down there. Right, I need you just to shout out your city. What city are you from? Right, holler at me. Let me know where you are. Toronto is in the house, of course. We had Montreal earlier, Brazil, Oakland, Scarborough, Atlanta, all the way. B-Town, I see you. Ottawa, all right, there we go. ATL, you're there. Brampton, right? Appreciate it. I need that love from you because I miss you all. Singapore, Vancouver, all right, there you go. Tobaco, right? I miss you guys so much. BPTN Nigeria, there you go. I'm playing you some music. Romania, there you go. Right, New York City, all right, y'all get it. Dallas, all right, DC. So lots of amazing things are happening. But I wanted to pause for a moment and make sure you heard from me, you heard my heart, right? There's some things happening here around the world that is hurtful, right? There's racism, right? There is, things that are happening in our backyard that is affecting Black tech professionals. And we know, that we are hurting together, right? We know, this has to come and this has to stop, right? And we want to make sure that we create an environment for you to do you well, for you to network with each other well, for you to engage with each other well. This is an opportunity for us to be more and to do more, right? And I know we can do it. I 100% know that we can and we will be more. But now is the time to connect. Now is the time to lean in. Now is the time to learn. Now is the time to grow. Now is the time to call on our allies. Now is the time for us to lean into each other, right? And I want you to know that you are not alone. I want you to know that BPTN is working hard to make sure that the companies that you are working within are connected to you and connected to the things that you are dealing with. On top of that, we want you to know that even the companies that are part of our portfolio, we're working hard for them to be, because now more than ever, it is not okay to be silent. It is not okay not to support. It is not okay to be disengaged, right? And we will work diligently with you and with your teams, right, to make sure that is the case. Please lean in. Please email us. Please connect with us, right? We're not alone. We're in this together and we will get stronger. So I wanted to make sure I told you that, because I'm usually not in these events, right? Josh does this thing, but I wanted to make sure you heard directly from me, right? That this too shall pass, and we are side by side, shoulder to shoulder with you. I want to make sure I also thank Shopify for their partnership and for their engagement. What an amazing group of people, right? I want y'all to shout them out, right? Just, on your chat, tell them thank you. Tell them for, thank you for creating this space and this environment, because they didn't have to. But not only did they put their resources up front, they said this was important. It wasn't just about, butts and chairs. They said this is something that's important to them, right? And they enable this to come to you. I'm so excited for the opportunity and the conversation you're about to have now. Is going to be it. And this is why we believe Shopify is, the most profitable, business right now in Canada, right? Because they understand the importance of community, right? Of building people up and being very intentional. So if you don't know already, you got to get on your social. If you've never been to a BPTN event before, if you just sit and stare at your screen like this, you're not doing it right. We're not going to invite you to the next one, right? So this time you got to get on your social, right? We are on Twitter, we are on Facebook. LinkedIn is our, of course, LinkedIn, our Slack group. If you're not part of that, make sure, you get part of that, right? But LinkedIn and of course, Insta is our two, choice, right? So tag us, right? Tag BPTN, hashtag BPTN, hashtag Masterclass, right? We starting to see you engage because, you know, we couldn't have everyone on this. And if you don't see it, there's almost 300 or 250 of y'all on this, right? So, you know, we want to make sure that we are creating an environment for you to thrive. But the folks that are not in the room right now, right? They need to know what you are learning. So please make sure you're hashtagging us. Please make sure you're connecting with us. We want to be engaged with you. Now, some quick housekeeping rules. Number one, right? Lots of really interesting things happening, you know, at LinkedIn. All right. But beyond like what's going on at LinkedIn or on that platform right now, right? Shopify said they want to connect with you directly here, right? So we have 2 talent acquisition team members that are here, right? That are ready to engage directly with you. If you're looking, if you're just browsing, if you just want to get to know people, if you just want to have a conversation, reach out to them. So I'm going to ask my 2 colleagues right now just to say what's up, right? So they see who you are. There you go, right? And my other colleague, all right, I want you to make sure you say hi. So there you go. So those are our 2 folks, right? Please engage them. Just like direct message them, engage with them. They want to connect with you, right? They want to make sure that you are engaged. So through the chat function, feel free to connect directly with them. But those are the 2 folks that I want you to lean in on and just do it. Let's just like go for it right now. Just say hi to them right now, like right now. Say it again. Just do it. Just like say hi to them, right? There you go, right? So they know who you are. They're engaging with you. This is not about I'm looking for work, right? But if you are, please like direct message them, right? And just get to know them, and they'll talk to you directly, right? And then if you got questions, now this is important because we say this every time, and poor Josh said this all the time. If you got questions for Josh, right, or for the panel members, I need you to look at your Q&A button. Your Q&A button, right? I need you to look at that. I need you to click it, and I need you then to ask that question. That is the only place we're taking questions, right? So please ask your questions only in the Q&A box, right? The chat is for us to engage with each other, right? But the Q&A box is the only place that Josh will be looking, right, to engage in conversation. So it is really very important that you do that, right? And then of course, there's gonna be, this is gonna be recorded, right? It will be provided on our website later, right? And we will make sure that you are the first one that knows about it, right? So feel free to, give us a little bit of time. We'll get it on there over the next week or so, and we'll make sure that you are engaged, right? So we have an amazing conversation happening, right? If you are excited about this, I want you to just throw up an emoji for me really quickly. If you're excited about this conversation, just like throw up an emoji, right? Because it's gonna be crazy, the conversation that's gonna happen right now, right? You need to be ready for it. Like get your notepad out, right? They're about to drop some gems for you, right? Even our staff on our team is like, I'm coming. I got some other stuff to do, but I'm coming. Right, so like it's exciting, right? The conversation is gonna be amazing, and I'm so pumped up to have Josh here, right? Josh, come on up. I'm gonna leave you all alone, right? And I'm gonna have my man Josh sort of take over because he's much more good looking than I am. So thank you all so much for having me. I am so excited to to be engaged with you, and we're just gonna have Josh come on now so I can leave you all to have an amazing conversation. Josh, you up?
Yeah, I am. Thank you so much, Lakan, and good to be here, folks. Lakan just bothered me up there, but I would take monetary rewards instead, if that's okay. I got Farai with me, and I'm going to give you guys a bit of a backdrop here. Farai is amazing. If you want to check him out more, go to FaraiMadzima.com. He is a well-rounded professional. And I say that with, every intent and purpose. He was telling me, oh, we're going to talk about feedback. And I'm like, feedback? Like, okay, I mean, we all talk to each other. And he's going to be like, yeah, this is going to be lit. And he showed us the deck. And I was like, yeah, we're going to have a fantastic conversation. And I'm excited. I'm pumped. I have one question for you, though, Farai, before we start. Because of the coronavirus and the pandemic, a lot of sleeping patterns have gone haywire, right? You go to bed at weird times, you come out of bed, you roll into work. Are you an early bird, or are you, sort of a night owl? Like you'd rather, be more productive at night?
Oh, word. Yeah, that's a great question. What's up? Before I answer that, Josh, I just want to big up the crew. Thank you, Lika and Joshua. There's a bunch of other folks in the background that you won't see on these screens that are making this possible. Thank you for inviting us, for inviting me to to come and share in this forum. Great to be here. And shout out to all the folks who are attending as well. So waking up. I got two kids, right? 8-year-old and an 8-month-old. I work best in the morning, but I can never function up until maybe like 9, 10 in the morning because they wake up, they need to be looked after, all the things that need to help mom and all that kind of stuff. So you will find more that I am an early bird, but not by choice, and not because I'm actually doing work, but because the family demands it, and that's what you got to do.
Yep, it's the responsibility. And folks, I want you all to chime in what you think you have changed into. Some people were early birders and now they're night owls. Feel free to sort of chime in on the chat button. Let's get that engagement flowing. Farai, you gave me an intro that I want you to give folks on the call. I thought it was powerful, and that's where I want us to start from. What's your background? How did you come up to this? Walk us through the journey.
All right, cool. So originally I was actually born in Zimbabwe. I spent the first 18 years of my life out there. And I had a fantastic, I will admit, a privileged upbringing. When I was 18, I wanted to actually be a pediatrician. Because when you're not, there are like, you're a lawyer, a doctor, an accountant, you're a business person. Those are the jobs that we know about, right?
Yeah.
So I was going to be a pediatrician, but I didn't get the grades. I actually didn't get enough qualifications to get into 4 universities that I'd applied for to study medicine, which meant that I ended up studying digital arts and technology. And that's when I got introduced to this idea that you can use software and design to create products that people use. It blew my mind. And that's how I got into user experience design. So this was in the UK. I left Zim when I was 18, went to the UK. I stayed there for 4 years. I was studying. Then I worked there for 7 years, firstly in small agencies where I was doing front-end development and that sort of thing. But my code sucked. I wasn't good enough to charge for it. So they were like, we've got this UX thing coming up. You interested in trying a bit of that? They sent me on a bunch of training, and I really, really enjoyed it. I found that it was a good blend of, the skills that I wanted to apply, both from a science and a design and art perspective. And so I worked there for a while. I joined a behavioral research consultancy as well, trying to understand more about how do people think about these designs that we put in front of them and how do they respond to those things. And then after doing that research, I went back into kind of the industry marketing. So I worked in several large marketing agencies in the UK for a few weeks. But if y'all are in the UK or if you've lived in the UK, y'all know there's no sunshine. And having grown up in Africa with like 300 days of sunshine a year, that was a bit of a challenge. So my wife and I decided to bounce and we went to South Africa and we stayed there for about 7 years. Enjoying the sunshine, but also I was part of a few marketing organizations, and finally ended up at a bank called Standard Bank, which is part of Stanbic, or the other way around. If you're in Africa, you might know these things. So I was there. I helped them to start up a big chunk of their design team. They already had one, but I started up a one that was focused on designing their apps and other products that were used internally and externally. And while I was there, I figured out, having lived in the UK, that the design conversations that we were having were fairly limited because in Africa and Zim in South Africa, where I've been, there are very few design schools. You can hardly do human-computer interaction or interaction design at university level. And so I wanted to kind of help move this conversation forward. So I managed to contact a dude who I shared a room with in the UK, who now worked at Dropbox. I hollered at him and I was like, listen, do you want to come to South Africa? I'm starting a conference. I got into touch with a few other people. In 2016, we started a conference called Pixel Up that we've run over the last 5 years in South Africa, where we invite designers from around the world to come and share their practices with the folks who are doing it on the ground in Africa, not so that they come over and solve the problems, but rather share their tools, share their approaches, so that we can see what could work for us. And then in the process of doing that, 2017, I got in touch with some folks at Shopify. They hollered and they were like, yo, you want to hang out in Ottawa? I was like, cool. I got on the bus, put my family on the bus. We packed our sofas and our beds. And yeah, so now I live in Ottawa. I've been here for 2.5 years. I'm a UX manager at Shopify. And yeah, it's been a fantastic opportunity and journey. Also, I've had some great perspectives, having grown up in Africa, lived in and worked in the UK and in South Africa, and now here in North America. That's helped me to kind of have a wide view of what's going on in the world. It's not by any means more informed than anybody else, but it's just it's very broad, and I enjoy using that as a way to talk about how do we work better together. That's my passion. The teams that we work in today, when we're fortunate, are teams that are very diverse. They're teams that have people from all parts of the world. And how do we, as people from different parts of the world, understand who we are, so that we can bring our best and authentic selves to the work that we're trying to do, so that we can fulfill ourselves personally, as well as the goals of the organizations that we work for. So that's me in the big
that is
nutshell.
phenomenal. I still have goosebumps the same way it was the first time. So we talked about the skills. Give it to us now in terms of the scale. What is feedback in this context? What are we looking at here, Farai?
All right, cool. So let me just throw up some pictures if that works for you.
Yeah, awesome. I can see them.
Cool. So in the work that I've been doing, I have found that in design, we're using software, we're using things like Figma, we're using tools like Sketch that you may use yourself or you may see on your colleagues' screens, that we use to kind of make what people call pretty things that you will see on the screen. We use whiteboards and Post-its and Sharpies to scribble things that will ultimately make sense and turn into software at some point. We use thinking frameworks and design frameworks. We use things like design sprints that help us to get from a point of understanding a problem to having some potential solutions on the table. And all these are fantastic. Today, I'd like to convince you that I want to try to convince you that there is another skill that I think is less discussed, is more ignored, but is absolutely fundamental to the successful creation of a design that is going to succeed in the market. And that skill is the skill of feedback. In particular, how do we give and receive feedback in a way that is going to be beneficial to the work that we do and to all of our teams? So how do we understand feedback? Well, feedback is a combination of several things. Or not a combination, but it comes in three flavors. The first kind of feedback is the appreciation feedback. Thank you very much for putting your effort into making that. It's great, and I'm happy to send that to the client as it is. This is a great design that acknowledges the culture of our locality while blending the best of your brand. Thank you for putting that together. So this is a way of telling people that something is good and that they've done a great piece of work, right? The other way that feedback can come through is the idea of evaluation. And when we evaluate, what we're trying to do is to benchmark, to rank and rate, to align expectations on what a thing should be. We expected this homepage to load in less than 70 milliseconds. And you guys have managed to do it in 30 milliseconds. This is fantastic, well done. Or it's taking twice that amount of time. What do you think we should be able to change, or what could we look at that would bring us back to that 70 millisecond benchmark that we had, right? This is an evaluation of what has been made to understand whether or not it meets the expectations that ideally we should have shared before we started doing the work. Sometimes you don't know the benchmark until you ship, and that sucks. But during the process of feedback, you can start to understand what we were aiming for through the process of evaluation. The third flavor of feedback that you can get is coaching. And coaching is a process of trying to learn and grow, to improve. And typically, this is not aimed at the made thing, but rather at the maker. So when I present my design, my colleagues, my boss, my peers, they may ask me questions around the approach that I was taking, and if there are ways to improve the skill set that I'm using to produce my designs. Right? And so this is a third flavor of feedback that's worth understanding, right? Now, the challenge is that we do not typically think of feedback in these differentiated ways. And we typically jumble these things up and deliver them in a way that typically might be wrong, because the ways that it can be wrong. One, as the person receiving the feedback, I might be expecting appreciation, and then you bring me evaluation, right? Or something like that. Or you bring me a blend of those things and you express it in a way that I don't understand. I messed up this weekend by doing this at home. So my son discovered Google Sheets. He learned about slides at school because they're all doing stuff online. And he was like, Dad, I've saved up my screen time. I want you to show me what is a slideshow. How do I make a slideshow? Because I really, really want to make a slideshow. So we sat down and, I showed him how to do a few things in Google Slides. Then he went off and he did his research. So he wanted to do a presentation on Africa, and he went and he Googled the slides. He wanted to talk about Shaka and all these things. And I was like, cool, you do you. He spent all of Saturday working on this thing. On Sunday morning, the family's in the lounge. We've all just woken up, and he runs in and he's like, okay, it's time. My slideshow is done. Like, can I put it on the big TV and can I show you, my slideshow? My man throws the slides up, and they're fantastic. Obviously, he only heard about Google Slides like the day before, but still, it's a fantastic effort what he's done. He had 6 slides and he talks through it, and all those things. And then, so my wife and I were like, this is great, this is fantastic, well done. And then we started telling him ways that he could make it better, and immediately he burst into tears. And I was like, okay, what's happened? What's wrong? And what I discovered is that he was expecting just appreciation, but we were coming through with evaluation. We were coming through with coaching at a time that was inappropriate. And so what I learned from that is the idea that when you are looking at something that somebody has made, you both have to align as to what kind of feedback is expected. Sometimes that person knows to ask you and say, listen, what I'm looking for is for you to evaluate my design. But sometimes they don't. And so as a giver of feedback, you have to find a way to understand what is the climate that is existing in this interaction, and what is the right way to kind of give that feedback. So it's important for us to understand, is it time to appreciate? Is it time to evaluate? Or is it time to coach, right? And knowing that, we then apply the right way to give feedback.
Gotcha. And just before you continue there, we're having questions rolling in, and
cool.
Guys, please feel free to use the Q&A chat box and send us questions. Again, we have Farai on here, so we want to put him under as much pressure as possible, right? One question that's come up now is, if I'm not in the stage of my career where I can give feedback, but I'm in the stage where I'm receiving feedback based on my position in my organization, how do I prepare for when I start giving feedback, right? Because I haven't had any practice. Do I take on projects on the side? Do I work with friends, like in the same industry, of course? Like, what do I use to get my cycles going?
Right, cool. First of all, your peers can be good sources of feedback. Right. So if you're fortunate enough to be working in a team where there are multiple people who might be on the same level as you, they can all take that position to be able to give you feedback. To be honest, I will say that feedback shouldn't necessarily be determined by hierarchy, right? Good ideas should be able to come from anywhere within an inclusive organization. And this is part of the work of this network, to make sure that organizations understand how this works. But an inclusive organization allows feedback from any level to any level. And so but sometimes I know that that's not a thing that we can change. And if it's not a thing that you can change right now, then the peers next to you, or you can also model accepting feedback from, should I say, beneath you in the hierarchy. If there are other people below, you should be able to ask them for feedback or to give them feedback as well. So those are good ways to kind of practice that. And I'll put up my hand, and, you can hit me up on like in fact, I'm not on Twitter much, but maybe on LinkedIn. I'm happy to kind of provide feedback, or give you time to practice that as well, so you can reach out.
Nice. Thank you so much for that. Please continue.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So at Shopify, we identify feedback as part of the design process. In fact, actually during like the first few days at Shopify, during the onboarding process, one of the key things that is spoken about is how to give and receive feedback. Like I was saying before, feedback should be available in any direction at any level of the organization. And we recognize that company-wide. But in the design process specifically, we also understand and have a way of thinking about how to give feedback. And there's several parts of our process that allow us to do that. The first one is design pairing. So design pairing is similar to, if any of y'all are engineers, you may have experienced the idea of code pairing or engineering pairing. The idea with design pairing is that you have two people who are working on the same design at the same time. So this can happen on a whiteboard, or we might be sharing a screen on Figma. That's happening remotely a lot these days. But the idea is that we are both working on a design, and typically one designer is driving the design, as in actually putting the marks on the page and moving things around. And the other one is maybe either asking questions to critique what is being done in real time, or to provide suggestions. They're not marking the homework, but what's happening is that every design decision that is being made is being critiqued by both of those people in real time from different perspectives, right? And this is a fantastic way to allow feedback to happen as we do the work. And what this is great for is when so to the earlier question, how do I learn how to do, how to give or receive feedback? This is a great way to do that. But what this also means is that I don't go working for a week and then present my designs to the team after a week's worth of work and then ask my first question about how am I doing, right? Because you've lost a week if you've done anything wrong that we could have discovered on the first day. So design pairing is one of the approaches that I've seen work really, really well in several teams, as a way of providing feedback in real time in an informal way, but as part of the process of designing. The second way is we have something called fresh eyes. And so fresh eyes is a bit more formal. And the idea here is that when you have made something, you bring it to a forum of people who have never seen it before. And you don't provide too much preface or explain what is happening. You just give them enough context to understand what has been made. So here is my initial stab at trying to solve the problem that we have on the homepage of X. And then you put it up. And then you wait and you listen for people to give their impressions and to give their understanding and to ask questions of what you have done. And these can be your peers, it could be anybody. And the fresh eyes is great as part of your design process. And you can do that after design pairing with people you haven't paired with, people from across the org. And what this helps with is to get an understanding of how am I doing? And how do people who don't know this problem see and understand what I'm doing, right? So this is an important process that we use as well to make sure that we are getting the right kind of feedback and critique on our designs at the right time and from a diverse population of the organization, right?
Gotcha.
So this is a great tool that is easily done. There's, again, there is nothing special about this particular process. All that is key is to make sure that you are putting your work up for people to see and that people are able to kind of to talk to it. And I'll talk more about like how people can get good at discussing design, right? And then the last one is design critiques. So this is another level of formality up. And this is a process where there are specific people, stakeholders, senior designers who will make time to review your designs in depth to understand whether they are meeting some of the strategies that we're trying to pursue, or whether they meet with other evaluation criteria that I may not see at my desk, but might be visible 2 or 3 levels above me or at a different perspective, right?
Yeah.
And so the design critique is a process that depending on how fast you're working, it could be weekly, it could be bi-week, every 2 weeks. But this is a much more formalized process. You take notes from this, you take actions from this, and you feed back to that forum to say, thanks for your feedback. Here's how I've improved the design based on the things that you've spoken about or some other things I've researched, and so on and so forth, right? So this is how we start to understand and use feedback as part of the design process. And I'm hoping that you can start to see here that, yes, if we weren't reviewing our designs, there is no way they could get better. And so we have to think of feedback as part of the toolkit. It is not the software. It is not the framework, but however, it is really important in how we do. For those of you who've worked with lean product lean or understood lean product development when it comes to innovation, there is this process called build, measure, learn, right? That allows you to kind of innovate and to develop new products and MVPs and so on and so forth. That measure part, right? That measure part is essentially seeking feedback. It is seeking evaluation.
Right.
to understand whether what I've done is right, right? So feedback is part of, in the same way that it's part of the lean product process, feedback is also part of the design process. And so this is the jam. That said, you want to go ahead, Josh? You got a thing?
Yeah, that's terrific. I just wanted to have a plug in there. And, guys, just to give you some context while we're sort of prepping for this in the back end, Farai gave me that, guy, I'm good kind of thing. Like, look me up and, see how I talk. And this is going to be a terrific conversation. So I was like, yeah, for sure, I'm going to do some research. And I have a question, almost like a participant. And now my question has been asked like 5 times. Like, it's unbelievable. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to bring that question forward to sort of ask it now because it seems so relevant at this point. And here's what it is. People are asking about how do I sort of coach up, or how do I give feedback to someone who might be my superior? Or if I'm new to a team, how do I sort of provide feedback in that context, sort of trying to read the room? And I'm linking this back to something that you talked about at the Adobe Summit in 2018, talking about the power index and how you gave the example of the Korean, sort of airline industry at the time, and linking that to how feedback and communication can be sort of achieved in a more streamlined manner, right? Because you're trying to do it up, in this case, going up. So can you just sort of walk us through what you think now, in case anything has changed from 2018 to now, that's absolutely fine. But in the case where it hasn't, what do you think folks can do when they're sort of talking to someone who may be more superior? Keeping in mind that a lot of us came from environments where the power index was pretty strong and well focused in the workplace.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So the idea of the power distance index essentially is the idea that in certain cultures, so I'm Shona from Zimbabwe, and in Shona culture, and in a lot of African and Asian cultures, there is this idea of high power distance index, the idea that if someone is your elder, if someone is your senior, they hold a certain, or you expect them to have a certain hold over you, a certain power over you. And they expect that they should be able to pass on certain feedback to you, and you don't question it. You just take it as it is, right? And that's certainly the culture that I grew up in. And so what that means is, to this question, when I have been born in that culture, when I've been educated in that culture, when I'm working in that culture, my expectations become that the people above me are people that I cannot speak to. And so I, having grown up in Zimbabwe, like I mentioned, I then went to the UK. And I worked in an organization that was flat. I'd never seen it before, but where I'm from in Zim, if you were the boss, you drove the Mercedes and you had the corner office. Then I moved to this company in the UK, and my boss is coming to work in shorts on his bicycle, and he's sleeping on my couch because we went out last night, right? And I'm like, I don't understand this. But nevertheless, during the work that we were doing, I made a mistake, and I failed to be able to communicate that to my boss, because from my culture, being able to communicate that kind of stuff to my boss was something that was alien to me and difficult for me. And ultimately, it resulted in me getting fired. So if you fast forward now to like the new environments, the new inclusive environments that we're trying to create, the ideal situation here should be that you identify culturally yourself if there's anything that might be at play when you are thinking about my boss and how I communicate with them, and also with them. What are their expectations? Do they expect flat, or do they expect hierarchy as well, right? If those expectations exist, then, or if they don't exist, then one of the things that you can do is that is really important to do, is to build trust, right? And building trust at Shopify is a critical thing we talk about a lot. We talk about this idea of building a trust battery between two humans. But a tool that I've used to try and do this between individuals, whether they're supers or not, is a life story conversation. So I set up a one-on-one meeting with somebody who I've never worked with before when I join a new team. And I have maybe a 45 to 1 hour meeting with that person. I spend the first half of it telling them about myself. So the story that I was just telling you guys about where I'm from and what I've done and all those things, I tell them that. That gives them an idea of who I am as a person and where I come from and some of the things that make me who I am as the person they're seeing in front of them. And then I invite them to do the same, right? I've set the example, I've opened the door. I do this with my bosses as well as people who report to me, as well as my peers, right? And I invite them to do the same. Sometimes this is shocking for people, but when you set it up in terms of saying, I think that if we get to know each other better, we can have crucial conversations in a much more open and vulnerable way. If you are able to have that first meeting with that person before you've had any work to do with them, then when it comes to giving each other feedback, because you know that person a little bit better and they know you a little bit better, it becomes it becomes easier for you to then have the feedback conversation with them, to be like, listen, I wanted to chat to you about X, Y, and Z, because you've built trust with them. If you try and give feedback in any direction, in an environment or in a relationship that lacks trust, then that's going to backfire. So even if your organization doesn't believe in this, doesn't do it, if you build that trust in a one-on-one life story type conversation, and you can bring up the idea that, you know what, I'm not used to giving feedback in this way. How are you used to giving feedback, et cetera, et cetera. So build the trust first and then see how you can incorporate the feedback into the conversation.
Awesome response, Farai. And you knocked off a couple more questions there, which is incredible. So, let's dive into this slide and probably the next one, so we're ensuring that we're covering the slides. Folks, keep those questions coming on. Farai is either knocking them off by answering something else, or I can roll them up into a massive question, and we can use the next 20 minutes very solidly. Let's go.
All right, cool. I'm gonna blitz a little bit, right? Okay, cool. So as humans, we suck at giving feedback. Like I've said, culture plays a part in it. We've grown up in certain ways in the, where we're from, and hearing feedback, and because of what we learned, that's what we end up perpetuating in our homes, and unfortunately also in the office if it's bad practice. The first one is an office practice that I've seen typically coming out of North America, which is the poop sandwich, right? And the idea with the poop sandwich is that you want to give somebody some negative feedback. So what you do is you first of all say something nice. That's the bun on the top, right? Then you say the horrible thing that you wanted to say, and then you say something nice at the end. You've made a nice poop sandwich. Here you go, and you deliver it to that person. This is a terrible way of giving feedback. First of all, you have given two positive things to one negative thing, right? Which entirely defeats the purpose of what you're trying to do. And in some cultures, people will be like, well, you think I'm great because you said two nice things and one horrible thing. Yeah. Secondly, it comes across as insincere, or you are unable to have, an open, honest conversation with me. It is a reflection of a lack of trust and perpetuates a lack of trust. It also tries to undermine my ability to take real talk, because you think that you need to make it soft and cushion it so that I can understand it, right? The poop sandwich does not help anybody. And it may be, in some cultures, like, you have to do it. It is not the right way at all. And I'll talk more a bit about what are some right ways to give feedback. The second challenge is that we're quick to react, right? So if I knock on this table, that is a reaction from the wood of this table. That reaction has no meaning, right? And sometimes when we see something, or when something happens, or when we're looking at someone's design, or we're looking at someone's spreadsheet, we are bound to react immediately. We just make a noise. Sometimes that noise has no meaning. It is not guided, right? But it can elicit a reaction, right? Because if somebody puts something up and you're like, that's terrible, as the first thing that came to your mind, and you say that up front, you are setting up a conversation that is going to be difficult, and it was not necessary for it to be that way. So instead of reacting, we want to take a minute to understand why we feel the reaction that we feel. Sometimes it's appropriate, right? Immediately you can clap your hands and be like, that's fantastic. Boom, you've hit the nail on the head. But again, you could be saying that, and actually it's not a very good design, right? So taking a moment, whatever you're feeling, just take a moment to understand, why do I feel good about this? Why do I feel uneasy? Why does this make me angry, right? And then when you've understood that, you can deliver something that is much more meaningful. So the reaction is also a challenge, and something that we are prone to doing. The last one is direction. Well, not the last one, but the last one I'm going to talk about today is direction, right? This is when somebody has made something, and we really guide against this in the work that we do at Shopify, which is someone has made something, and then during the critique, we say, well, why don't you just move this button over here and you put this thing over here? What you have done by saying those things is taken away that person's job. That person's job is to make that decision. What you bring to the table is to question, listen, the way you've aligned that button and that paragraph, it looks as though there's a relationship between those two things when there actually isn't. Maybe you should look at fixing that. They can then go and think about how they move those things. But if you tell them, you are doing their job for them, right? So direction is not the jam. These are at least 3 ways in which we suck at giving feedback, right? And so in response, so a thing that I've learned and that I use a lot is the discussing design critique framework. So the book is there, Discussing Design. I'll send out these notes and you can kind of look it up. By 2 dudes, a guy called Adam Conner and Aaron Irizarry. And the discussing design critique framework, and the word here is critique. When you critique something, you're asking some very good questions to understand how well it works, right? First of all, you review the objective. If you wanted to make sure that everybody can understand that this product is on sale, that was the objective. Make sure that everybody can understand that this thing is on sale. Then you ask, what were the elements that were changed and do they meet the objective? If you wanted customers to understand that this product is now on sale, by making the font smaller, you haven't actually made it more prominent.
That's
right?
Yep.
So people aren't able to see that.
Mm-hmm.
Just by saying that, I am able to objectively recognize what the person should have been aiming for, to recognize what they have changed and whether or not that change is helping to meet the goals. I have not said they're a crap designer. I have made no comments on who they are as a person or how they work, but I have been objective in being able to identify what were we trying to achieve, what actions did we take, and whether those actions get us closer or further away from the problem that we're trying to solve. That's it, right? That's what I love about this framework. It's a great way of discussing design in a very clear way and in a way that moves the product forward towards the goal that we're trying to get to, right? It's got nothing to do with me and nothing to do with you as a person. It's about the work and the goals. Not only do we, as humans, do we suck at giving feedback, we suck at receiving feedback. And this is the most critical part that I've been learning about and developing myself, which is the idea that we expect people to say the right thing, to give us great feedback. Yes, we have experienced situations where feedback tears you down, where feedback takes away, your passion. It feels like you're a failure, right? We have experienced that. And as our response to that, we expect that we want people who are going to give us great feedback, people who will mentor and coach us and make us better. But as people, we also have a power as receivers of feedback to guide a person who is not skilled at giving good feedback, to guide them towards giving us the information that we want. We do not have to accept every reaction, every direction, and every poop sandwich that comes at us as the truth, as the only way to have a conversation about what's done. We can think about how to receive feedback in a great way. So here are some ways in which that we suck at receiving feedback. First of all, we take it personally, right? So somebody says something to us about the work that we've done, and immediately we say, well, I'm a failure. I always screw up. This is about me, right? This is the thing that in all the teams that I've worked in as a contributor and as a manager, I've come across this, I do it myself, which is that when I have made something and I present the strategy, and then I get the feedback, your presentation is missing input from these important stakeholders and we can't proceed with it as it is. Oh man, I messed up, and that's the kind of language I have. And immediately by doing that, I am stopping myself from understanding what the problem is and how I can make it better, right? So taking it personally is one way that we suck at receiving feedback, right? The second way is that we shoot the messenger, right? And so depending on the relationship that I've got with this person, I'm like, well, you've always had something against me. I know you, you're the problem. I can, like, how are you qualified to tell me that I can't do this thing, right? And there are many reasons and many, ways that the relationship I have with the person giving me feedback is broken that will stop me from hearing what I need to hear so that I can make things better, right? And the third way that we mess this up is that we don't want to believe what we're hearing, right? No, that's not me. That's wrong. You're misinformed. Who have you been speaking to that was telling you that? Where are the facts? Where's the data, right? And so immediately our response, our reaction is that this is not the truth and it's a lie, right? So all of these ways, we don't do it all the time, but these are ways that we can sabotage the receiving of good feedback, right? So what can we do instead? The most important thing before you respond, before you react. And so our first instinct is to play defense. If I put something up on the wall and I say, please have a look at it and tell me what you think about it, and you say something bad, my nature is to say, no, I'm going to play defense against that. I'm going to put up my shield, and then I'm going to kind of stop you from saying anything bad about what I've done.
Right.
Instead, if we acknowledge that the giver may have a perspective that we don't have, if we acknowledge that we may have some blind spots, some things that we don't know, that we can't see about ourselves and the work that we've done, then we can ask some very good questions that can improve how we receive feedback. The first one is asking the question, who is giving the feedback? What is the relationship between us and them? And how does that relationship have an impact on what I'm hearing? Is there something underlying that stops me from hearing what's being said, or something underlying that makes that person speak to me in that way, right? If there is, then it may be worth trying to understand and deal with that situation before we have the conversation around this. Or maybe acknowledging it and saying, listen, it feels like there's this thing, X thing. If we acknowledge that, what other things can you tell me about this design, right? So understanding who is giving the feedback and where they're coming from. You might be speaking to a competing designer. You might be speaking to someone who, when you've just given that feedback, you've just, nullified 2 weeks of work that they've done. And so when they're giving you this feedback, they're coming from a certain place. So you need to understand what that is, right? The second thing is then to understand, what is that person's perspective? How are they seeing what you have made, right? So as I said in the previous example, if you've just nullified 2 weeks of someone's work, that's the perspective with which they're looking at what you've just done. And there's a strong likelihood that they may come at this negatively, not because it's bad, but because they have this other perspective, right? So our CEO talks about this idea that when we disagree, it's because a lot of times, based on where they sit in the organization, they see something you don't see. And because of where you sit in the organization, you see something that they don't see. And so when we come to a disagreement, when we're having these feedback conversations, we can share those perspectives and close that knowledge differential so that we can actually talk about what's going on. It doesn't mean that you're wrong just by default of what you're saying, but because you might be seeing a picture that I don't have, right? As a, whether it's because I'm an employee or because I'm a manager or because I'm in marketing or because I'm an engineer, there is a perspective I bring to this. And so we can ask the question, how are you seeing this? We can be curious about where they're coming from so that we can understand their feedback. And then the last thing is to understand, what are their goals? Like, what are they trying to achieve? And is it aligned with what you're trying to achieve, right? And when we see or understand that this is what's happening, so that's why I love the discussing design critique framework that I shared before, because it acknowledges if you're trying to reach this goal, then this work that you've done gets us there or doesn't get us there. So it's about aligning these things. So how do we find out? Well, by engaging your curiosity means asking questions, right? Like I was saying before, it means that when you're receiving feedback, playing defense isn't the first move. Sometimes the first best move is to take a breath, take 2 breaths, then think about some very good questions to ask the person who's giving you feedback, or some questions to ask yourself that will help you to understand, who is this person, what's their perspective, and what are their goals in speaking, or in sharing this feedback in the way that they're doing that. Engage your curiosity. And in this way, you can turn any poop sandwich, you can turn any bit of direction or any reaction into some useful advice that will ultimately further your own goals and your own career. And so this for me is kind of the critical thing that I've been learning, is that when feedback is coming at me, how do I take a breath and take a moment to guide it in a way that is going to be valuable to me, even if the person who's giving me feedback is not skilled at doing that? They may not be skilled at feedback, but they have a perspective that is great. They've spent 5 years in the company and I haven't. And I have to figure out, how do I get the benefit of those 5 years rather than just dismissing them as somebody who, is got something against me that they're trying to work on. So I'm hoping that I've been able to convince you that, one, feedback is a design skill. It is part of the toolkit. It is part of, along with the software and the whiteboards and the design sprints and everything else that we're doing, learning how to give and receive good feedback is critical to making sure that the design that you're working on improves in a way that is going to benefit you, your career, and your organization. But more importantly, I'm hoping that I've convinced you that feedback is a life skill. Everything that I've just spoken about will apply not just to your design. I told you about the situation that I had with my son earlier on, but in your home, on these difficult streets, how well do you give and receive feedback? This can be the difference between your success and the success of everybody else, and our ability to engage with the challenges that we face in the workplace, in our designs and outside, in a way that is productive. I think is critical to us being a positive force, both in our own careers, in our own lives, in our homes, as well as the world at large. So I would encourage you folks, let's learn more about giving and receiving feedback. These are 3 great books that I refer to on a regular basis: Radical Candor, Discussing Design, and Thanks for the Feedback. Thanks for the Feedback is one I've been reading most recently. if you can get these things, expense them if your company will allow you to. These are investments in your career, but also investments in your personal life. Josh, I've spoken a lot. I'm going to shut up now.
No, we have used this time, and trust me, it has been phenomenal. I have so many questions, and the folks have so many questions, and we only have 4 minutes. So here's what I'm going to do.
Right.
I'm going to take a bunch of those questions and fire them off to you, and you're going to bring back the answers to me in as short sentences as possible. If I'm just starting out and I'm trying to pivot from one industry to becoming a UX, UI, sort of designer, researcher, developer, what are your key sort of advice nuggets that you can provide to me to help me with this transition?
Reach out to people. Not everybody will respond, but reach out to people in this network and in other networks, LinkedIn, and I get good guidance and answers to that question. I can't answer one question. Depends on where you're coming from and where you're trying to go, but ask around and then go on to Medium. Medium has a lot of kind of articles about getting into user experience design that I think could be very helpful in that respect. Read the Medium, talk to humans in BBTN, LinkedIn, all those places. I think you will get some good advice that might help guide you.
Gotcha. So regarding feedback, what do you do? What's your response when someone shuts you down, right? When you're sort of providing feedback and you get that defensive shutdown reaction, what is your counter reaction to that?
So my response to that is a question. Why would you not want me to say more about this issue? Right? What is stopping? So if, for example, I am presenting something, I present some rationale, and the shutdown could be, well, that's just rubbish. Right? Typically, a shutdown is something like that. It's an emotional response. It's not actually facts, because if someone's got facts, we can discuss facts. When someone shuts down, they kind of arguing a position. And I can ask them about if they want me to stop speaking, or if they think that what I'm saying is rubbish. They're going to have to justify that so that we can have that conversation going forward. But it is about understanding where are they coming from and why are they doing that.
From a technical standpoint, because we have a fair amount of technical folks on here, it's kind of more exciting for them to fix bugs or build some of the features, but also there's need for prioritization, which kind of comes as, part of the feedback. So how do they sort of make a balance between prioritizing, trying to go and create new features and create new things, and sort of balancing that out with making the existing things better as a result of the use of the feedback?
Right. So I think this comes down to, and this is the age-old question about any product. And it's about understanding from a product perspective. If you've got a product manager in your midst, being able to prioritize how well does your product support the needs of the market right now versus your competitor. There's a model called the Kano model, K-A-N-O, that's worth looking at. That is great at helping you to understand whether the stuff that we have is basic, it is fantastic, or if it is something that we need to scrap and we need to stop working on. So I would suggest having a look at that model. But yeah, it's an age-old question in maintaining and developing a great product.
Fantastic. And my last question for you, because we're 1 minute away from time, is there's a big pool and it's getting bigger of individuals, skilled individuals, new individuals to the industry who are trying to break into performing user experience on various levels, both technical and non-technical. How can I stand out? Like what do I need to do to stand out?
You need to have a great website that shows off what you do and how you do, but in a way that is unique to you. You can copy and paste the format of creating that, but as recruiters, when we are looking at the work that somebody has done, we want to understand what are you capable of doing. And that is throughout the entire design process, not just the final thing that you've made, but the entire process from beginning to end. If you're able to communicate that across several projects in a way that is well structured and well put together, that is a fantastic way for you to stand out. And on top of that, present yourself as part of that work. Who am I and what perspective do I bring?
This has been terrific, Farai. I cannot emphasize this further. Amazing, amazing, amazing. The feedback we've gotten from the feedback section has been remarkable. I know that we're still going to get a bit more. It's 1 o'clock, folks, so I have to cut it off here. Thank you guys so much for your time, for sticking with us through this. A bunch of questions were not answered, but feel free to know that you can reach out to Farai via LinkedIn. Go to his website, faraimadzima.com. We also have Tiffany and Yosha answering questions via the chat box for any Shopify questions. This session is recorded, folks. Gonna be shared with you as well as the deck on the BPTN website in about a few days. So give us some time to collate that. Again, thank you so much for coming out, listening, engaging, vibing. It's been good vibes. Terrific launch hour, this one. And looking forward to the next session. Thank you so much again, Farai, for your time and expertise. We really loved it.
Thank you all for organizing. Peace.